Welcome in, everyone, to this special episode of Beyond the Tape, and we've made it to our next group of position rankings for our summer scouting series. Today, we're talking way too early receiver rankings, and not just me, as you can see on the screen, joined by PFF's co-host of the College Football Show and the NFL Show, Dalton Wasserman. Dalton, we had you on for a mock draft, leading up to the 25 draft. And it went on for almost 2.5 hours. So I'm hoping to get you in and out of here a little bit quicker than that. But, man, it is great to see you. And I'm pumped to talk about these receivers with you.
Absolutely. I'm back because we had fun back then. And look, this is a group of wide receivers. I know everybody's waiting on the 2027 guys with Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams, but there's still a lot of good football players here. I think kind of the theme of this 2026 class at a lot of positions is wait and see who really breaks out into superstardom, right? And I think this group is no different, but wide receivers getting more and more talented every year. There's more and more depth every year from what we're seeing coming out with all these colleges throwing the ball like crazy, and then the NFL throwing the ball over 60% of the time now throughout the league. So it's another talented group, and I'm glad we get to break it down early. And we're going to see. I think you could see a lot of changes to these rankings by the end of the season because it is such a wait and see kind of class.
100%. And I think another big part of that is there's a lot of different flavors to these types of receivers. We're going to talk about some guys who are X, some guys who will be Z or slot, some guys who are slot only, and some guys who bring some special teams value, and maybe that bumps them up and makes them in the honorable mentions or sneaks them into the top 10 or what have you. So a lot of really fun names, and like you said, there's a lot of wait and see. I think no one exemplifies that better than the first honorable mention I want to bring to the table. Kicking things off with my number 15 receiver, we'll call him honorable mention, the place we wanted to start at least, Nick Harbor. And I think you said this on the PFF NFL show, or maybe it was the CFP show. I guess it would make more sense if it was on the CFP show. Like all-world potential there at the South Carolina offense. But it's still an offense, like, let's wait and see. That being said, I think Sellers has shown a little bit of something, and if you want to see more quarterback thoughts, definitely go back and check that episode out here on YouTube. But, Nick Harbor, not quite as much, but, like, he's this guy that on paper, you look at him and you're like, holy cow. Or even you just look at him, let's just leave it at that. Looks like a DK Metcalf clone, looks like a guy who could be NFL-level number one wide receiver. The problem is the aspect of playing receiver, he kind of struggles at it as a whole. Rounded routes, limited route tree, slow off the line of scrimmage. There's just a lot of work to be done. All-world potential, has all the physicality in the world, but just not there from an actual, receiver standpoint.
Yeah, right now, Nick Harbor, I think, is the ultimate idea, right? He's 6'5", he's, 225, 230 pounds, and yet he's an Olympic-level sprinter who honestly might be running track at the Olympics one day, right? With I think is it a 10 100-meter dash that we've heard about with him? I mean, just ridiculous for a guy that size to be able to do that. But you mentioned it, the lack of polish in the route running, I think accelerating and decelerating, which is always a hard thing for those track guys that are so one-speed runners, right? And then there's times I think he's still a bit of a body catcher. So, look, there's a lot of polish that needs to go on it. I think it's the same thing with Lenora Sellers, like you just mentioned. That South Carolina offense is very much an idea. They've got freakish athletic talent, both of them, but Harbor's even more raw. He had less than 30 catches last year. So I think there's moments where you go, okay, that guy's a freak, the size, speed freak. And even if you're looking lower than DK Metcalf, you think about a guy like Dante Thornton Jr., who was just drafted by the Raiders this past draft, and you go, okay, that's an idea. We can take this guy. He can be a consistent home run threat for us and threaten safeties constantly, but we definitely need to see more polish out of Harbor before he becomes a first-round type of prospect.
Awesome. I'll go ahead and roll through the rest of my honorable mentions. Then I want to get to a couple of the names that you have on that I don't have on my list. But let's talk about Eric Rivers. I know you want to talk about him a little bit later, and we can save that conversation for then. But, oh, my God, FIU transfer to Georgia Tech. This guy, his tape at FIU, he looks like easily the best athlete on the field with a lot of burst out of his routes at all three levels. I'm in on Eric Rivers. I just need to see him do it at a Power 4 level. But we'll come back to that once we get into your top 10. Jeremy Bernard, I think this is just like a high floor receiver. I think this is just one of these guys that'll probably live in the league for a good long, you know what's going to happen? My kids are going to be like, remember those receivers you remember from your childhood? And it's a big thing on X. And we talk about guys like, I can't think of a great example off the top. Michael Floyd, I guess, is a Notre Dame fan. It's like the random receiver that sometimes pops into my head. Like, I feel like Jeremy Bernard is going to be that for my kids one day. Just lives in the league, solid receiver 3, good against zone coverage, high IQ player, friendly frame, but at the same time, no real special physical traits. So kind of hard to see him being a receiver 1 at the next level. But we'll see. I will say he does a great job adjusting to balls off his frame. And unfortunately enough, there were a lot of those from Jalen Milroe last year as a work in progress as a passer. So that is something I do take as a little bit more of a certainty within Bernard's game. And then 12 and 11, two former Oklahoma teammates. Deion Burks is still there, but Nick Anderson, you can tell me on either one of these guys, 12, 11, you could have flipped it. Anderson, banged up a lot last year, didn't really get to fully see what he could have been, but 6'4", listed at 219 pounds. Curious to see if that's the actual weight. But now at LSU, and I mean, Nussmeier is going to let it rip. So I think this could be a huge year for his production. But I mean, galloping down the field, huge strides. And because of that size, speed, absolute vertical threat. And then Deion Burks, a little bit smaller, 5'9", 190, but really good athlete in his own right, really quick feet, very good separator. So really this comes down to your flavor. Do you want someone who's a little bit more Marquez Valdez-Scantling, or do you want someone who's a little bit more of that smaller body, probably a Z to a slot, but more of your pure separator? That's kind of where these two are side by side, but yet they can also be worlds apart in a lot of ways with how they play. But both those guys didn't quite have the year I hoped last year at Oklahoma. Oklahoma as a whole didn't really have the year I was hoping they would have last year on offense. But that kind of rounds out my honorable mentions. Love to hear your thoughts on those guys, and I want to toss it to you to rattle off your honorable mentions.
Yeah, I think you get a similar vibe from Burks and Bernard. And I think one of the fun things we're doing at PFF now, we just started this past draft and we're going to expand it, is getting into team boards, right? So it's not just, what team needs wide receivers, right? What team needs an X, what team needs a slot guy, what team needs a separator, right? Things like that the type of receivers that we're talking about. So on some boards and for some teams who need that type of route runner, then you're going to get Burks or Bernard going. If you need a true X and something more like the 6'4" Nick Anderson, then he's going to be higher on your board. I think it's when it gets harder to order those guys, you kind of just group them together and go, okay, they're of a similar talent level. But I'm with you. Look, Garrett Nussmeier, like you mentioned, second in the nation in dropbacks last year. So Nick Anderson, and I want to mention Aaron Anderson down there for LSU too, who's got some talent. He's a really solid route runner. They're going to be slinging the ball all over the place. That's how that team is designed. And I want to mention Burks as well, because our lead draft analyst, Trevor Sikkema, he's a big fan of Deion Burks as well. As long as that quarterback situation and the rest of the supporting cast is at least functional this year for Oklahoma, because it really wasn't last year, Burks is going to be their number one target. He's going to be able to get shifty in a lot of those RPO schemes, a lot of those getting down the seam, getting in slants over the middle from that slot position. So you've got guys who have a much better opportunity this year to make things happen, especially when it comes to the production of it. But it just speaks to how many different types of receivers we're going to talk about today when you have those three guys there.
No doubt about it, man. So let's start with, we'll come back to Jacoby Lane. So let's put a pin in that one, because he did make my top 10. But as a Notre Dame fan, we got to start with Malachi Fields, who if I didn't have Nick Harbor in here, and again, I think Malachi Fields is probably a better receiver right now. Not even probably, he is a better receiver right now than Harbor. But Harbor made the list just because, all world kind of potential. But, tell us a little bit about Malachi Fields and what he brings to this Notre Dame offense.
Big 6'4" contested catch guy. He's one of those big receivers who's not necessarily going to be an elite separator, but when you talk about running that vertical tree, running those deep in cuts and making contested catches, because he's got such a big body, he's been really good the last couple of years at Virginia as their X receiver, and he's going to Notre Dame this year, as you know, to kind of fill the role that Bo Collins tried to fill last year, but a little bit better, right? Collins, it just never panned out all the way for him at Notre Dame, and Fields is a similar big, you want back shoulders, you want 12-yard curls that he can body up and put cornerbacks on the glass. You want those deep in cuts. I think maybe even occasionally one of those slot fades that are kind of the Mike Denbrock special in that offense. If you want a guy who can just do all of, you kind of just say the big receiver things at 6'4" and 220 plus pounds, that's what Malachi Fields is going to give you. He's a size guy. I think they're going to see a lot of red zone fade with him as well this year at Notre Dame. If you need size and you need a true X in your room to win those contested situations, Malachi Fields is your guy.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. And I also will say, and we'll see where Bo Collins in his career go, I am more optimistic at this point of the year on Fields than I was on Collins at this point in the cycle last year. But also, I think CJ Carr, more of your pocket passer, I think he's going to give more opportunities to those receivers, specifically outside the hashes. Wouldn't necessarily call that Riley Leonard's game. I think it's going to have to be for CJ Carr. All right, take your picking here. Do you want to go Dejon Stripling or Eric McAllister next?
Look, I got to tell you, McAllister is kind of a guy for me. I've been watching the last 2 years. He had a really good couple of years at Boise State. He's got over an 80 PFF receiving grade in 3 straight seasons. This is a guy who doesn't blow you away necessarily with tools, although you look up the measurables. He's measured at 6'3", 205. He's got good speed, probably 4.4 speed when you watch some of the explosive plays he made for TCU last year. That's a high-flying offense as well that he's really mostly played on the outside down there, got a little bit into the slot 20% of the time, but just just a consistent football player, right? I think just one of those guys, you go, one singular trait doesn't blow you away, but then you watch him snap to snap, and he feels like he's always just a step open. He's always making the play that you need to get the first down. It's similar to another Boise State receiver that they had a few years ago, although McAllister is a little bit bigger. It's the same way I felt when I watched Khalil Shakir back in the day, right? Where it's just like, this guy just makes plays. And there's not one singular trait that blows you. It's not 4.2 speed. It's not a crazy frame. It's not a crazy vertical. I think he's going to be a solid athlete when the combine comes around next year. But this is a guy I haven't heard talked about much. And TCU's got a very good offense, and he's the best receiver amongst that group. I think McAllister is in for another very good year because he's already given you 3 of them, 2 at Boise State and another one at TCU already.
And it's going to be interesting to see him with Josh Hoover, who's kind of, I wish I could have talked about him in my quarterback rankings. I just got around to him and then turned McAllister a little too late to put them both in these rankings. But there might be something there. He could be a little bit of a dark horse name to keep your eye on once it comes to the NFL draft, and that would make all the better for the case for McAllister. All right, what about De'Zhaun Stribling?
Stribling is somebody who, honestly, last year for Oklahoma State was a disaster last year, but Stribling was their one ray of hope offensively. He's a guy, he's 6'4", he's got long strides and good speed. If he gets out in the open field and that stride opens up, he can get explosive. He can create explosive plays down the field. And to me, he's going to have a real opportunity. I don't think he's high on a lot of people's radars yet, but going to Ole Miss, I think, is a perfect situation for him. You want a Trey Harris replacement at Ole Miss, and you want a guy like that Austin Simmons can throw to in his first year starting. I think Stribling is a perfect fit. When you talk about them getting Harrison Wallace from Penn State, you still have Caden Lee in the slot. You got 2 really good tight ends. I think Ole Miss offensively, they're always going to be fine. We'll see what they look like with losing all his pieces on defense. But I think Stribling as the Trey Harris replacement, a guy who's got a big body, can get vertical, and who's an underrated route runner even for his size, I think he could have a huge year at Ole Miss as long as Austin Simmons progresses the way that he's supposed to under Lane Kiffin. But that offense feels like it's designed for Stribling to succeed. He's a name you're going to hear about shortly into the season, I think.
Oh man, Ole Miss offense putting up numbers. I mean, that's why you pay Lane Kiffin the money. He's getting paid. Awesome. Those are our honorable mentions. Let's go ahead and let's jump into my receiver number 10. I'm going to kick it off with Eugene Wilson. And obviously only 4 games played last year. He got the red shirt because of that. And really this comes down to 5'10", 183. So again, we're talking about a Z to a slot type, not going to be your prototypical X. This guy is a special athlete when at 100%. I mean, this guy's change of direction in short area burst. It's just one of those athletic types that he's going to get open just because of how much burst this guy has. I also think his change of direction makes him an impact player after the catch at the next level. And then my favorite thing about him, for someone who's 183, no one told him he's that size when it comes to working between the hashes. This guy is absolutely fearless, and he has taken some huge hits and had 2 surgeries last year. So maybe we want to rein that in a little bit, but I see a high-end athlete who's going to be able to separate at a high level at a high rate at the next level, I should say. And he's not going to be afraid to work the middle of the field where I would expect an NFL team is going to ask him to work. Also with that, I'm curious to see what the long speed is. Again, so much of what you see is underneath intermediate that I do wonder what, the long speed looks like. That'll be something that once we get some tracking data and some miles per hour on that, that'll be huge. That and plus, whatever he does run at the combine. And then the only other negative I really have, which is crazy to say about a redshirt sophomore, is his size is going to limit him. He's not an X. I like to keep him off, the line of scrimmage, avoid press at all, possible outcomes. But I think even as a Z, right, just make this guy a flanker, and especially with the advent or just the higher usage of like motion pre-snap. And I'm not saying he's going to go to Miami, but I think about how Mike McDaniel can kind of scheme some of that stuff up. If there's the team with that thought in mind, and they look at Eugene Wilson as the fit for that, he could be a really, really fun pro to watch. I know Eugene Wilson's in your top 10, so real quick, let me hear some of your thoughts on Eugene Wilson.
I have him at number 8, and what you have with him, I love that you use the word fearless. With the ball in his hands, he's lightning, man. He's just one of those yards after catch specialists. And what's crazy is we're talking this highly about a receiver who through a year plus, obviously had the injuries last year, only a 3.6 yard average depth of target, which is microscopic. It's crazy to see a receiver with an ADOT that low getting this type of attention, but he's lightning with the ball in his hands. I think you mentioned it, even for that size, you could convince me he's a running back when he has the ball in his hands. Honestly, he looks like a running back out there. He's got, all the names have been used, Deebo Samuel and all the other guys that we use in this prototype, but every team needs a player like this now. I think you mentioned it. Miami, San Fran. I think even a Liam Cohen in Jacksonville would love to have a guy like this. I know Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas are already great after the catch too, but every team needs a guy like this. Just throw him a screen, give him a jet sweep, hand him the football, line him up in the backfield. I don't care. Find a way to give him the ball because his feet are absolute lightning. I just hope he's 100% healthy this year because I think for that Florida Gator team, he's the most important piece aside from DJ Lagway.
Yeah, great shout on the ADOT. So some of those advanced stats here. His ADOT last year was 6, which is about a yard lower than the guy we both have at number 9. And then every other name on my list is above 10. So just to put that in perspective. But go back to 2023, ADOT 2.8. I almost had to like refresh the page a couple times on PFF. Like, there's no way that could be right. And then going back to his fearlessness, 0 career drops. And this is a guy who is consistently working over the middle of the field, taking a lot of tough hits. So love to see that from Eugene Wilson. All right, let's get on to that guy who was aforementioned. Number 9 for both of us, Casey Concepcion, I should say, junior, NC State transfer. He's going to Texas A&M, and rightfully so. You look at how the numbers have kind of dropped off for him 2023 to 2024. I mean, just even looking at yards after the catch. After the catch in 23, 527. Last year, 265. 10 touchdowns in 23, 6 last year. And it almost had half the yardage total, 845 receiving yards in 23, 460. It was just a disappointing offense for NC State. And you especially see when they play a team like Clemson, where it's like, we have to get the ball to Concepcion because he's our guy and he's the only guy. And everyone on the field knows that. So he is just absolutely put into, just a full-on bottle there, which makes it tough. And now the other side of that, he's going to a Power 4 conference that has a lot more weapons at their disposal. And, it's kind of interesting. You look at their backfield, depending on what happens with Le'Veon Moss, but him plus Reed, and then the yards after the catch of Kevin Concepcion, it is kind of similar to almost Oklahoma, Deion Burks. It's Mateer, it's Ott, it's Burks. A whole lot of guys that I don't want anything to do with in open space if I'm a defensive player. So really, my notes on him, quick twitch. I mean, this is another one of these like crazy athletes, super explosive, awesome change of direction. That's why NC State is engineering, especially last year, every single touch imaginable, whether it's direct handoffs, it's jet sweeps, it's quick screens. I mean, everything they can do to get him the ball as soon as possible, they tried to do it. That, on the other side, we get to the negatives. Not an X receiver, so I had to put that down. And, now it's just kind of this, we've seen one good year, we've seen one bad year. Is this going to go the Rondale Moore route where, each year's kind of diminishing returns? Or does he go to a Power 4 team, get the right resources, and everything's back on track? So very interested to see, specifically with the quarterback play. I think Reed's probably a step up from what he had quarterback-wise at NC State last year. But again, I think of Reed as a dual threat guy, not necessarily your pocket passer, so still probably a little bit of work in progress just as a passer. So still TBD, but 5'11", 187. I like him as a Z, like him as a slot, like him as a gadget guy. But he's one of these guys that either shoots up the rankings by the end of the year, or we're probably talking as more like, your day 3 specialist. He fits a role within an offense, or he just goes back to school entirely. But let me hear your thoughts on KC.
So I think one thing to point out last year, I want to point out one more drop-off number. His freshman year, he had 20 missed tackles forced as a receiver. Right. This past year, only 7. So after the catch, it wasn't as great. And you mentioned it. He was the focal point of the offense. And I want to point out just the troubles at quarterback that NC State had last year. It was already shaky with Grayson McCall coming up and running a more traditional system from from what he did at Coastal Carolina. Then he gets hurt and medically retires, and they have a true freshman, CJ Bailey, throwing to him. And it was just it was really kind of, I don't want to say dysfunctional at NC State on offense last year, but kind of, right? So now you're going to, and this is why I have Trey Wilson, I should say, ahead of Concepcion. Is I think Wilson's a better route runner, straight up. I think when we do see Wilson get downfield, he's a better route runner, and I would take him as a pure receiver. Concepcion, you're right. If he becomes the number 1 receiver at A&M, and he's going to see a boatload of those jet sweeps and triple option and be involved in the backfield, Texas A&M is going to run the football as much as any team in the country this year, right? And I do think Marcel Reed is going to be a little bit better with a full offseason where we know now he's the starter. Because remember, last year, supposed to be Connor Wigman. Now it's Marcel Reed's team. But I think the more I watch Concepcion, I honestly think the fallback might be, because I don't know if you went back to 2023 and watched all the tape when he was in the backfield, just straight up playing running back.
I like where you're going.
I wonder if eventually if it doesn't totally work out at receiver, if it's Tyrone Tracy, if it's Brashard Smith, if he's actually in the league just a running back. If he is just part of somebody's committee, he's a round 4 or 5 guy like Tyrone Tracy was. I know Brashard went in the 7th. I thought he should have gone sooner than that. And he can just be a backfield weapon, because to me, when he takes those handoffs, running even just basic zone runs in NC State's offense in 2023, it looked pretty natural. He's got the vision and the tackle breaking ability of a tailback. He would just need more reps. Now, he's not going to be, obviously, A&M's starting running back, because they've got Le'Veon Moss and they have Amari Daniels, so he's really going to be the gadget guy. But I do wonder if the fallback here with Concepcion is that he actually ends up in a different position if he ends up as a running back by the time he gets to the NFL.
Well, I think that's especially interesting as, 32 beat writers, a big part of what we do is following training camp buzz. And the more I see a KaVontae Turpin as maybe just the best pure running back in Dallas, specifically as like a guy to get out in space, get wide of the tackles, use as a pass catching weapon, I'm very open to that idea. Like, I think that could ultimately, especially if Turpin lays the groundwork, I could see where teams start looking at, Concepcion could be our KaVontae Turpin. Okay, maybe that. And now you're probably right. Better receiver is probably Eugene Wilson right now. But when I was putting these rankings together, and sometimes that's the tough part about this, I'm not doing this for a specific scheme. I'm not Kevin O'Connell. I don't have a playbook in mind. I'm kind of thinking about all the different ways you could potentially use Casey. So that's part of why he did get the bump over me. But I have them in the same bucket. And some of it's also Eugene Wilson. How many games can he play this year? Can he stay healthy? All that sort of fun stuff. But yeah, Concepcion, it's going to be a big year for him. And I'm really excited to see what he brings to the table. Receiver number 8. I feel like this is like maybe the most polarizing guy. Like, I don't know. Him and probably my guy who's number 7. You had him as an honorable mention. I could see where there's been a lot of debate about him. But Carnell Tate, man, there's people who love him. He feels like a no doubt top 3. I think Todd McShay had him as like receiver 2. I can understand that. There's definitely a high floor that comes with Carnell Tate. But with that, I just wonder about the upside. Really, to me, his scouting report was pretty simple. 6'3", 191. I love the size. He plays a lot on the outside, can be an X receiver. I think he's got good burst working laterally. Like, he's a better athlete working left to right than sometimes he shows just getting down the field, and that's kind of the knock on him. You just wish there was a little bit more speed in the tank and a little bit more of that burner ability to push a defense deep. But that being said, he's good for what you're going to ask him to do. Work the middle of the field, big friendly target, solid hands. He's not great after the catch, but he is 6'3", 191, and he's willing to lower his shoulder into you, so he always falls forward. So he's kind of WYSIWYG for me. What you see is what you get. It's not special. So that's why he's here at 8. Kind of the better version of Jeremy Bernard for me, where he'll probably live in the league for a decade, and he'll be one of these names that my kids rattle off as like, do you remember this guy? And I'll be like, yeah, I definitely remember. I remember scouting that guy. So high floor, but limited ceiling here for Carnell Tate. Where do you see him as?
Agreed. By the way, my guy that I always flash back to as a Jets fan is always Jericho Cotchery. That was my guy. Number 89 back in the day as a Jet fan. That's the guy I always remember. Yes. I'm like, yeah, that's my 850-yard receiver from my childhood. Absolutely. But, I think about Tate along those same lines. So I think, look, some people are going to absolutely love him, in part because, there's a little helmet scouting that goes on now with Ohio State receivers because, well, they're all freaks of nature. Carnell Tate's one of those guys, not as much a freak of nature as certainly as his teammate Jeremiah Smith now. But I think you do have a guy I almost think about even in the James Jones kind of mold, right? Where he was a good football player for a long time. He was a solid 2, or sometimes you could consider him a high-end 3. I think what you said about Tate here, what you see is what you get. I think that's exactly right. He's solid. He's reliable. He feels like a guy who every trade across the board is B to B minus, and that's okay. Look, you need those guys on your team. Not every single guy on your team is going to be Justin Jefferson, right? If your second or third receiver at the end of the day is Carnell Tate, I don't think that's a huge issue. To me right now, he is very solidly a top 60 player, but almost, unless we see a bigger breakout this year, almost certainly not a top 20 to 25 player. I think when you talk about getting a Carnell Tate in the second round as like a surefire, maybe one day somewhere between 800 and 1,000 yard starter, then I have no issue with that evaluation. I have him at number 6 right now. You have him at 8. I think that's about the right range. I wouldn't have him as high as 2 like some other people would, but I think there is a solid starter in there for sure.
Yeah, and I forgot. I'd be remiss not to mention his best trait is finding the soft spots in zone. He has, and it's Brian Hartline. I mean, he's just a master of how he coaches these guys up. It was the best part of Egbuka's profile for me, and especially if you go to an offense like Egbuka in the Bucs, you play man coverage against Mike Evans, ball's going that way. You've made your bed, now sleep in it. But when you have that focal point of an offense that can beat man coverage and be the number one, sometimes you just need that guy to fill in the soft spots and be just that little bit of a change up to your fastball, so to speak. And I think that's what Igbuka will be for the Bucks. And I think that's exactly what Carnell Tate will probably be at the next level. So if you're talking about adding him to a team that has their clear-cut number one, I'm totally here for it. Drafting him to be your clear-cut number one, that's going to be a different story for me. All right, this might be the most polarizing guy because this guy's not on your list. He was one of your honorable mentions, though, and I totally understand. And in a lot of ways, he makes me think about, and he could have a same type of season as your number two and my guy who is my number four. So we'll obviously get that when we get there. But 6'4", 195, really fluid athlete, I think. I think he carries that weight well. I do wonder what the long speed is. Another one of these guys where he's a little bit bigger, so I'm not expecting him to run 4.4 flat or 4.3 something. But if he can be around 4.48 to 4.52, I think that would be ideal. 12 touchdowns last year. I think he owes a good bit of that to, Lincoln Riley. There was a lot of that is schemed up inside the red zone. But I think some of that's also how I kind of envision his usage. I think he's, again, a solid separator, good enough burst, kind of like Carnell Tate, where, again, you're seeing a little bit more of the athleticism laterally. And you see, like, at USC, there'd be times that they bring him into motion, and then the snap happens, and he's running right back in the direction where he just came in motion from. And he's just a better athlete than the guy across from him. And he takes the rest of the way. So I think there's enough yards after the catch ability. But with this big frame, I'd like to see him add a little bit of weight to 195, but at the same time, add some weight. You're going to probably lose a little bit of that athleticism, that lateral movement skills. So it's a little bit of a trade-off. He's definitely a little bit of a projection pick here, 525 yards, not the most prolific offense last year for what we're accustomed to for USC, but I like the frame and I like the athlete with it. And I think there's a lot of different ways you could use him. And I wouldn't be shocked if, we get the reception perception profile from Matt Harmon that I could see him being maybe better as a power slot, especially depends on what that official weight comes in as. So I like the player, I like the athleticism, I like the frame, but it's definitely a little bit of a work in progress. This is me kind of planting my flag saying this is going to be a step forward year for Jacoby Lane. But let me hear, he was in your honorable mentions. What do you like? And then what held him out of your top 10?
I think you have to bring him up because there's not this many fluid athletes at 6'4", right? You can tell even with the ball in his hands, there are certain plays where I'm like, man, guys that tall they're not usually shaking people. They're not usually using the dead leg like he's using them, right? So I think he is a terrific athlete for 6'4". And then the con of it is, I think you were absolutely right on the head where I watch him and I go, he plays a little thin. Right? If he's listed at 195, maybe he's that, maybe he's not. He does play a little bit thin. If he could ever keep that at something closer to 205, 210, then you start talking about a monster. Then you start talking about, a guy USC previously had in Drake London or somebody like that, right? But the obvious pros are dynamic athlete, really good in the red zone. And I'm curious to see where the full season of this goes because his last 3 games last year, and this is with Jaden Maiava as his quarterback, who will be his quarterback all of this year instead of Miller Moss. Because the one thing, look, Miller Moss is a good quarterback and he's going to do great things for Louisville. Can't really push the ball downfield, does not have a very good arm. Lane is a guy, if we want to see him separate downfield and win on those deeper routes, got to have the quarterback to do it. Maiava can sling it downfield. I think everything you get in a 6'4" athlete in Lane, it's all potential. I need more consistency, right? That's the big thing for me. Only 2 games with at least 60 yards last year. So it's inconsistent. He's talented for sure. He's inconsistent. He's got the frame. The red zone part, I think, to me is the biggest pro right now. He's excellent in the red zone. And then he's going to be competing for targets with a couple other guys in that offense as well, but they're going to be high flying still. So I think Lane, there's definitely a lot of potential. I can't put him in here yet until I see him more consistent on a week-to-week basis, but there is a lot of talent there.
Yeah, and I mean, again, you see it with his ability to accelerate. I think he gets to his top speed pretty well. But again, and part of the reason I think maybe big slot is the route to go, if he doesn't add any more mass, I worry, and this is like weird, normally you say this about corners, I worry about him on the perimeter being bullied a little bit. And right, I could just see the right corner, and the right corner's not necessarily coming to my mind. But if he's your X receiver and he's on the line of scrimmage, I worry that man press specialist corner isn't going to let him get off the sideline or off the line of scrimmage rather. Or if there's a jump ball on the sideline, there he goes right out of the frame. And that's that. So I agree. If Drake London's 213, that feels like a lofty goal here for someone who's listed at 195, but if at all possible, and everyone at the combine, the water weight, it kicks in. But if we could get to a true 205, 210, I don't think he'll be as highly touted and be the prospect rank that I gave Drake London. He was my wide receiver 1 that year, but he could get a little bit closer to that. And again, he does, there's some shades of what my receiver 4, your receiver 2, there's some shades of that in there, but that guy's he's got a better year of production showing it. So that's why he ranks higher than Jacoby Lane. All right, let's move on to Eric Singleton Jr. This is another fun one. This is another fun guy. This is who, Eric Rivers is having to step in for and replace at Georgia Tech. And, let's just be honest, Georgia Tech's passing attack, I wouldn't call it, game breaking. That is not necessarily their idea or identity. And they were a team that actually, I think last year proved me wrong in some respect. You think Georgia Tech winning a specific way. I think last year they had a few more ways to win. But that being said, wasn't necessarily always with their passing attack. That's not Haynes King per se. But Eric Singleton Jr., and, this might be a lofty comp, and I'm not saying it's my finalized comp here, but there's some Terry McLaurin to him where he's 5'11", Terry's 6 foot, and there's just some plays where he tracks the ball really well. I think he has good body control, can work and catch the ball really well in the air. That's a little bit, Terry McLaurin didn't do that all the time in college, but, dealing with the Ryan Fitzpatrick, the Sam Howells of his early career, you get a little bit of that, well, oh, God, this guy's better at the catch point than I thought. And it's because of college. He's just a better separator and didn't have to do all that much. But I saw some of that, that body control, ability to work back to the football in the air on top of great speed, can absolutely get down the field. And I think a nice gadget weapon because of his athleticism. And I think he's a solid route runner, not the best, but there's definitely some work to be done there. I think there's definitely a little bit of detail that can be worked there. But nonetheless, I think he has the athletic traits and the willingness to grow and learn there. The big thing is, Georgia Tech, not known for their passing attack. This is a pretty limited route tree, and that's kind of my point there. I think the routes themselves can be tightened up just a little bit, but also it's a pretty lackadaisical. It's a pretty limited route tree, I should say. And, he is on the slimmer side, so kind of like Terry McLaurin. Again, you look at Terry, he's a little bit on the slim side, but I think he plays above that. I think the same is true here for Eric Singleton. And this is a fascinating Auburn team, dude, with OU transfer, whose name's now escaping me, coming into play quarterback.
Jackson Arnold.
Yeah, Jackson Arnold, former 5-star, recruit. This feels like a team that's poised to break out. But, we've been kind of saying that for a few years about Auburn. We've been saying that for a few years about Arnold. So I'm interested to see if it all comes together this year. But on paper, this looks like the year that could send Eric Singleton Jr. into first-round conversations.
And you could argue Singleton's not even the best receiver on his own team with Cam Coleman sitting there, right? So you're talking about an Auburn team that's trying to get explosive. It's exactly why they went and got Singleton. And you make a great point about some of the difficulties because you see his surface level stats kind of stagnated last year at Georgia Tech. Kind of the same as they were his freshman year. And there's two reasons for that. One, you mentioned it. Look, Georgia Tech, they're either going to run the football or they're going to get vertical. There's not really a whole lot of in between. So the fact that there's not a ton of polish on intermediate routes, and I think there's times when he decelerates, it's not sharp, it's not exploding. I forget who it was talking about. Maybe it was Puka Nacua talking about exploding into your breaks. I think there's times where that can be a little lackadaisical for Singleton, but the home run speed is absolutely there. McLaurin's a good call out. A name that I thought about watching him earlier this week was also Rashid Shaheed for the Saints. I think there's a similar vibe there. Similar size, home run hitter, jet sweep and gadget stuff if you want. I think I think about the Singleton punt or kick return. I would put him back there just like Shaheed as well. He's just a dynamic athlete with a boatload of speed, right? So I think you're talking about this Auburn offense now. It's still going to be run heavy because it's Hugh Freeze, and I think Jackson Arnold's got more. He's got more legs to him than people think, and it's still a team that wants to run the ball. But as arguably their number 2 receiver, he's going to get a lot of opportunities downfield. That's going to be the emphasis of this Auburn passing game, and Singleton fits it perfectly. He's got all the speed to do it. I need more polish as a route runner. He's obviously, like, you probably mentioned already, as a Z or a slot or a guy, kind of that move guy that you motion all over the place, whereas Cam Coleman's a big 6'3" X who can still fly downfield. He's a perfect complement. I think you're going to get a real idea in something closer to an NFL offense, not all the way, of the role that Singleton could play in the NFL.
Yeah, I think that's the exact – when I say more detail in his routes, that you kind of put it perfectly. So if it was Puka Nacua, shout out to one of the best route runners in football, and a guy who wasn't a great, off-the-chart tester or anything like that, but he is explosive out of his breaks. And that's – Singleton is a better athlete. And sometimes you just want to see him plant that foot, and then, boom, there's the opening, put the football on the numbers, let's go. But I'm interested to see if he does take that step forward. But someone with speed and ball tracking, my ears are perked. I'm interested to see where this goes.
There is a big difference, and I think it's one of the biggest things scouting wide receivers, tight ends, whoever. The huge difference between being fast and separating. It's really what makes. Eric Singleton's probably faster than the rest of these guys. He is faster, I would say, straight line than the rest of these guys ahead of him, but it's knowing how to get that step and create that space. That's what makes you a great wide receiver instead of just a good fast one.
100, especially considering the guy, the spoiler, there's a guy from Clemson, there's one more guy from USC. I'll leave it at that. Those guys are just naturally better separators, and they kind of hit your point to the head.
Rookie. It's all about rookie talk in fantasy football right now. So why not go use all that knowledge to do something other than a mock draft? Chris Gimino won $8,000 with just 2 teams last year, and each draft took 5 minutes. That's pretty good ROI. You can start doing rookie drafts for money today on Fast Draft. The Origins tournament is live. It is the place to go and monetize your knowledge of rookies and use your favorite player profiler host promo code for a $25 deposit match. Now let's go start drafting faster.
Let's get on to Elijah Surratt. This is your ex-receiver, and St. Francis transferred to JMU. He's one of these Kurt Signetti guys that comes and makes his way over at Indiana. A big friendly target. I think he carries 209 really well. Can get down the field, works the sideline. Another one of these guys, wouldn't shock me if he became a power slot, just because I think there's some physicality there as a blocker. Not going to write home about it, but I do like, if they didn't just extend Cortland Sutton, would this be someone that Sean Payton's circling and being like, yeah, or if they didn't just draft Pat Bryant to maybe do some of that same sort of stuff. But fearless, working over the middle of the field, a lot of RPOs in that Indiana offense. You already start to see a little bit of that. And I also think he's pretty good off script. I think he was a pretty QB friendly guy. When the play broke down, he's always looking back to the quarterback. Where can I make a play? And I'm a sucker for guys that take these steps up the rung of the ladder, like Jared Verse, Albany to Florida State, and then he shows up to Florida State, and it's like, okay, this guy belongs here. Eric Rivers earlier, he looks the part at FIU, and if that statement's true with him at Georgia Tech playing against Power 4 comp, then he's going to shoot up these rankings. I am biased towards guys who have multiple steps along the way, climb the ladder, and showcase, hey, I fit at all of these places. So I'm a big fan. Some of the negatives, I don't think he's the most flashy route runner or anything like that. But I think as a possession, X, put him on the line of scrimmage. I don't think you're asking him to do that necessarily at the next level. And then just 1 year of the Big Ten production, that's a smaller fault compared to some of these guys like Eric Rivers who don't have any Power 4 comp. That's why he's in my top 5 versus an honorable mention. But overall, big fan of Elijah Surratt. I know Trev is as well. I know he's been kind of leading the charge on the Surratt hive. But let me hear where you had. I think we have Surratt and Singleton flip, basically. He's your 6 versus he's my 5.
Yeah, I have Surratt 7. I have him 7 right now because I think the lack of top-end speed, he's probably, if I were guessing eyeballing, he's probably a 4-5 guy, which is fine. You could succeed 4, 5, like 5, that. But fundamentally sound route runner. Love the way, I'll tell you what, you want to throw this guy a back shoulder fade. I absolutely love the body control. When Curtis Rourke last year, anytime he got to go one-on-one with Surratt to the back shoulder, he was absolutely going to haul it in. The body control downfield is excellent. When we look at, he had an excellent deep receiving grade last year, one of the best in the country, and it's not because he's like Singleton and one of those burners who's going to run away from you. He just got the body control and the tough. He's such a tough guy, isn't he? You mentioned it. He carries 6'2" and 210 well. He plays physical at all times. And you want a great stat here that I have. Look, people think about contested catches being 50-50 balls, right? And generally, actually, when you look at the numbers, if you're at 50% of your contested catch rate, because think about it, a completion is the only good outcome for the receiver, right? The good outcomes for the defender can be bad throw, can be pass breakup, can be interception, can be teammate comes to help you, whatever else, right? There's so many more good outcomes for the defense. And 50-50, if a receiver's hauling in 50%, that's actually a really good rate. 3 full seasons in college, Surratt's hauled in over 65% of his contested catches. It's just an absolutely ridiculous rate. And it's not just, jump balls, I'm taller than you, and that sort of thing. It's over the middle of the field. It's slants with 5'10" corners draped all over him that just can't get around his body. I think when you talk about a guy who can, again, back shoulder fades are one of my favorite things from him, and B, those middle of the field targets, when it's 3rd and 4 and you just need the Michael Thomas slant route on the outside to get you that 5-6 yards and move the chains, that's what I think he is. He's a chain mover. I think that's one of the things that he would get into the NFL, and maybe he wouldn't lead the league in yards, but he'd be in the top 6 or 8 guys of first downs picked up. That's where I'm at with Surratt. He's quietly just one of the most solid players in the entire country. I think I would almost guarantee he's an early to mid day 2 pick, like a top 70 guy who you just go, that's a reliable starter, maybe touches 1,000 yards a couple of times in his career because he's so darn fundamentally sound and he's so physical and so tough at the catch point, especially.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. That same draft window where Michael Pittman Jr. came off the board, Jaden Higgins last year, T. Higgins even, that top of the second round, maybe you're not quite a first round athlete, but damn, you're a good football player, man. I want you on my team. And going back to your contested catch rate, even just looking at last year, of all the guys on my list that I brought to the table today, most contested catches at 16, most contested catch opportunities at 27, highest average depth of target over 13 yards. And again, not a burner. That to me signals QB confidence. And now we have Fernando Mendoza showing up. And oh my God, that ADOT might find a way to just go up just a little bit more because Mendoza is going to let it rip. My thing with Surratt, if he can get a little bit more consistent on that backside, dagger route, because you talk about it, he can do those back shoulder fades. He has QB confidence working down the sideline, pushing it deep. You had that little 12-yard inbreaker, that 15-yard inbreaker. Get a DB on his heels and then snap, work middle of the field. He's got the body for it. Then we're talking about enough of a route tree where it's like, okay, maybe he does sneak in late first round. But he's not quite my highest X receiver of today. And actually, the number one receiver is an X receiver. But beating him out by one spot is another guy that is absolutely an X receiver. Denzel Boston, he's your receiver too. And dude, I get it. Like I kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier with Jacoby Lane, but there's a little bit of Drake London and Denzel Boston, the way he just kind of moves at 209 pounds, where I don't think he's as shifty as Ted McMillan even, or like a Drake London, but there's a little bit of that where it's like, dude, 209 is not supposed to move that easy. But this guy plucks it out of the air. You see the 9 touchdowns to just 3 drops. Love that for a guy his frame. Just going to go up and get it. He works back to the football, too, on comeback routes. Not going to let the ball get to him. He's going to go attack the football. Friendly target over the middle of the field. Works the sideline well, too. And, again, that kind of speaks to that body control and just overall athleticism. He can work both sides of that. And then I think last year, the quarterback play, Washington was a little up and down. I know a couple of different guys were under center last year for them. So I'm really curious to see what happens this year, another step forward in that program. And he's also a guy that, kind of 1 year starting, but you can't fault him necessarily for that because, 2 years ago, he's, behind guys like Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, and Jalen McMillan, casually 3 guys who went top 100. So because of that, I'd like to see him do it for a second year just to put that, quote unquote concern to bed. I also think he's a solid blocker too. And again, some of that's that athleticism, body control, but again, he's just got really good play strength too, while also being a really fluid mover. So Dalton, tell me why you're a receiver too.
Honestly, when you watch the first 4 or 5 games of last year's tape, you see a big guy who was still working on the route running. But honestly, by the time I got to the second half, I thought he looked good in the Michigan game. Yeah. There was a few games later in the season when he really, I think it got just consistently reliable with him, despite you mentioned the quarterback change from Will Rogers to Damon Williams, who keep an eye out on Damon Williams too, because he's an explosive playmaker. He's going to be fun this year. And we could see him get more vertical with Boston. But the more I watched the second half of the year of Denzel Boston, I thought I was watching Jaden Higgins tape again. I just thought it was very. I know you mentioned Drake London and Boston's not quite as fluid. I think it's more in the Jaden Higgins package. Yeah, I think if the releases off the line of scrimmage, because that was maybe the most impressive part of Higgins as well for that size. If the releases off the line of scrimmage take another step, I think you have an extremely similar player. I think you have almost the same player, and in a receiver class that doesn't have Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze, right? And it's in a class where you're talking about, like in this receiver class, Jaden Higgins would be a top 3 guy instead of the 6th guy off the board, right? That's where I think I'm at with Boston, is that with him being wide receiver 2 for me, I see reliable, I see big body, I see the footwork getting better, which to me is the most important part for him. And now it's just going to be a matter of it transitioning this year at Washington to a young quarterback who maybe can work you the ball vertically a little bit more, because Will Rogers was not going to do that. Will Rogers was going to throw you slants all night. That's just the way it was going to go. So he certainly got the footwork in the release package, plenty of reps going with the slants with Will Rogers most of the year. But no, Boston, again, the last 5-6 games I watched him, I said that's Jaden Higgins. I think it's darn near the same player. I really do.
And I think that's a good comp too. And I don't think Higgins, people talk about his movement skills, and part of that is just you watch a guy who's 6'4", and sometimes tape just doesn't capture it. But once I saw him at the Senior Bowl, I was like, whoa, this guy. And I literally I was just rewatching Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins on the flight to Mobile. And I was like, God, this guy moves better. He's just more explosive at the line of scrimmage. I think, and the release packages kind of speak to that. and just overall kind of carries the weight and moves more fluidly than I think, the camera on the sideline, the over-the-top camera really showcases. So I think all that is really true for Denzel Boston. So, yeah, no, I totally understand him being really anywhere from receiver 2 to 4 here. And it comes down to flavor, too. Boston's the second highest X I have on here, so you could look at it that way if that's what you're looking for your team. That does take us into Antonio Williams, who all these guys, my number one guy, clear-cut number one, I have a first-round grade on him. I'm confident with him. And honestly, I think he's going to end up being in my top 10 once we get to my big board, but we'll see. I don't want to commit to that. I want to stack up all these guys and fully see. And then 2 through 4, I'm comfortable with, mid to late first round on, my receiver 2, Antonio Williams, and then Denzel Boston. That's kind of where I'm at right now with this receiver class. Not a whole lot of awesome high-end talent other than my top guy. And then a lot of guys, I think, if you're in the 20s or later, feel free to take them. But Antonio Williams, man, he makes me think of Josh Downs. 5'11", 190, kind of that same, archetype too, playing in the ACC, slot receiver, awesome separator, really explosive burst, shifty after the catch. He's one of these guys, though, like the drops, and the drops will come up for the guy who's at number one, but I felt like the drops, and maybe it was just the way I was feeling that day, they more irritated me with Antonio Williams than they did with my guy at number one. But at the same time, he's got, Antonio Williams got some crazy circus catches too. So I think the ball tracking and the body control are there. It's just kind of cleaning up some of these focus drops. But all in all, I think you're getting kind of a Josh Downs type of receiver here. Slot at the next level, super explosive, get him the ball quick, get him out in space, and good things will happen. So he did have a foot injury in 2023. And like I said, 8 drops last year. He had the highest drop percentage of anybody we'll talk about at 9.6%. Definitely want to see that come down this year. But other than that, not a whole lot of major flaws for Antonio Williams. My main question would be like, how high is the ceiling? But we live in a day and age where receiver, like you said earlier, it's a depth position. You're rotating in a ton of guys. You're more often than not going to have 3 receivers unless you're the Pittsburgh Steelers and Arthur Smith's calling your plays. You're going to probably have 3 receivers on the field. So even if he's a slot only, he's a starter for you.
Josh Downs is a great call. I think it's a really good call because, would I consider Josh Downs a number one receiver? No, probably not, but he's a darn good football player. And you talk about Williams being a reliable separator, and even though he's only 5'11 and 190 listed, sneaky speed. Does it feel like, certain guys are fast and they just run by you? Does it feel like when you watch safeties react to Antonio Williams, like they don't see it coming when he runs that skinny post, like split and cover 2 with that skinny post, and it's like, oh, this guy's actually fast. Oh, shoot, we got to move. And then he's already by you, right? That's what it feels like to me. And I think this year, a big thing for me, got better after the catch. His first 2 years, he only forced 9 missed tackles. This past year, 14. So I think you have a guy who's getting better after the catch. You can use him at more depths of the field, even behind the line of scrimmage in the screen game. And I love, too, that it felt like Cade Klubnik last year in every big situation, every big moment. Antonio Williams was the guy he was going to, right? You had some young guys around him who are very, very talented. Bryant Wesco, TJ Moore, right? There's other weapons out there, but it feels like Antonio Williams just has the right combination of separation ability, speed, and just as a savvy route runner who knows where he needs to be at all times. I think it's somebody you can just rely on constantly, right? I think we have a lot of these guys in this class where it's like, hey, I need a first down. That guy can go get it for me, right? I don't know that we don't have any super freaks. We might have to wait for 2027, but this is the exact type of player who you go, you know what? Put him in the slot. He's going to make 8, 9, 10 catches a game because that's just what he does. He finds ways to get open. And then if he does get turned loose and he gets on safety's toes quick enough, he's gone. He's got very, very sneaky speed.
Yeah, and also I did want to note, brings some special teams value. He is the punt returner there, so he does bring that for something that's, sometimes that's the tiebreaker between some of these guys. But to your point, yeah, big moment. This guy on an out route, you just move the chains. He's going to be open, and Klubnik's going to hit him because he's an accurate passer. Move the sticks forward. It's a first down for Clemson. I love watching him. And, I mean, you have to respect the slant, too. So I can see a world where a nickel corner is just stuck between a rock and a hard place with how shifty Williams is. All right, let's get on to my receiver number 2. I'm going to go with Makai Lemon here. Really, the only negative I have for him is God, why didn't you make him 6'1", 205? Or 6'2", 210? Why couldn't he have Trey Harris's body? Because this guy is so skilled. I mean, a really nice route runner, good athlete. I think he gets to his top speed relatively quickly. Shifty both with the ball in his hands and with the ball not in his hands. Better in the air than you would think for someone 5'11", 190. Really, there's not a whole lot of nitpicks I have in his game other than I wish he was bigger so we could make him an X, but as a Z, to me, the best slot option in this class, not many other nitpicks I have for Makai Lemon. And then I just want to see more volume, right? Like 52 catches, 764 yards. You noted it earlier. Wasn't necessarily the best fit, Miller Moss. And the name's now escaping me, but their head coach, their play caller, Lincoln
Riley, yeah.
The one name you shouldn't forget when it comes to college play callers. But wasn't a total mesh there, so I'm hoping that unlocks Makai Lemon a little bit more. We get to see those kind of stats that back up the player I think I see on tape, especially against like Notre Dame. You know, he was a really fun player to watch. Him and Quentin Joyner, I feel like just like, whoa, watch these guys make Notre Dame's defense look a little silly. Still one of the best defenses in college football, and I will take that to the bank for the rest of my life pretty much. But those are my kind of thoughts on Makai Lemon. I don't have a whole lot of negatives. I know he's Trev's receiver one. I can totally understand that, especially again in this day and age where you're pretty much running 3 receivers. There's not many – I don't see many teams not having him on the field because of that. So, yeah, big fan of Makai Lemon.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think a dynamic route runner. And I think this USC, Lincoln Riley's offense always has these slot receivers that just know what the hell they're doing, man. Yeah. Go back, CeeDee Lamb, Jordan Addison. I even think about a guy who got drafted later, like a Taj Washington. He just always has these slot guys who are, yes, the focal point of the offense, especially a lot of the RPO stuff that they do run. And that's why I think Lemon is a little more of a seamless fit with Lincoln Riley than, say, Jacoby Lane, who they don't always have those big 6'4" receivers. They have those shifty route runners in this offense. When I was watching Lemon and look, a guy that I loved last year that I still think it's a travesty went undrafted was Xavier Restrepo. I think Lemon is a jacked up version, especially with the straight line speed of Xavier Restrepo. I see similar route running chops, a guy who uses the stems in his routes, not just the top of the route, but the stems in them to get where he needs to be and to set up defenders and get in their blind spot. I think I can totally see why Trevor has him number one. If you like pure separators, you like Makai Lemon. It's just that's the way it is, and he's going to get a ton of open targets this year. I think the big question with USC's offense really is more so their offensive line than the weapons. We'll see if Mayava can get him the ball accurately, consistently enough, but he's going to be open. That's the one thing you know about Makai Lemon. He is going to be open. You just don't get that many receivers every year that are over 3 yards per route run. So he separates, he's efficient, he's dangerous after the catch. He's got a little bit, pretty much everything you'd want out of a slot receiver is what Makai Lemon's given you.
He has the second highest yards per route run of the guys we're going to talk about, only behind the guy at number one. And to your point, Restrepo, I think, is actually a really solid comp because you look at Restrepo and you're like 5'10", and then you almost just want to fill in the blank and say 180. But Restrepo was kind of yoked. Mans was well built. He was 200 pounds, and because of that, he had a little bit of a bowling ball factor. And I think Lemon has some of that, a little bit of contact balance after the catch. And then you compare that to Burks, who's 5'9", 190. Eric Rivers, 5'11", 175, or his former USC teammate, Zachariah Branch, 5'10", listed at 180. That feels a little generous. But I also think Makai Lemon at the next level, I need him to go to an offense that's just going to spam slot fades because of how much you have to respect with the short area burst, the yards after the catch. This guy is going to be a killer on slot fades because he's got the long speed, I think even more so than an Antonio Williams and some of the other slot guys that we've talked about. But all that said, let's go ahead and do the boring part. Our receiver one, Jordan Tyson. Like I said, I'm kind of on the James Foster side of this where he feels like consensus receiver one. It's just is he player 20, 25 on your big board, or is he in the top 10? I think James Hadamond's player 8 on his big board, and wouldn't shock me if he ends up being around that. Other than the concentration drops, I don't know what's not to love about Jordan Tyson. For an X receiver, he's a little bit more Matthew Golden size at 6'1", 195 versus Trey Harris. You wish he could be an inch taller and 15 pounds heavier. But that's okay. He's an explosive athlete with killer body control. He has a little bit of that Matthew Golden, especially, ironically enough, going head-to-head in the college football playoff where there's some balls put in the air and you're like, no shot he makes that catch. And he just goes up, contorts the football, and makes a hell of a grab. Works the sideline well, never waits for the football, and he's the best route runner in college football. I think you said this on the college football show. There is no better route runner in college football in that 10 to 19-yard range. This guy, he has that Justin Jefferson quality where he can accelerate, he can decelerate, and he can explode through the break. There's not much to love. Yes, the drop rate's a little high, almost 9%, but I think you can clean that up. It's just some concentration drops, kind of like Antonio Williams, where you make some of these spectacular catches. I think the focus drops, we can clean that up. Let's get you on the jugs machine. And if I'm an NFL coach, if that's the only obstacle I have to clear, that's the only hurdle I have to jump, then sure, let's get this guy in my offense. So big fan of Jordan Tyson. I think he's going to be somewhere in my top 10 to 12 on my big board when all is said and done.
Yeah, I forget where we had him on ours in our initial. I might have to look at that real quick because Max and I, we built the initial board, and then Trevor's going to tweak it from there. Where did we have him? We put Tyson at 14. I think we loaded the top. There's some defensive guys, a lot of defensive linemen in there. There's a couple of quarterbacks, but we had him at 14. But he's going to be in that top 20 range at the very least, right? And I think, it's funny because you've mentioned him a couple times as an ex receiver, and I think he's a guy who can just play wherever you put him. He's got a lot of experience in the slot. I actually thought when you saw the second half breakout last year, it's because they were using him more as the Z and moving him around in the formation and allowing him to get vertical from the outside more often. And boy, I'll tell you, I wish he would have gotten to play against Texas because there's a good case that Arizona State would have won that game if he hadn't. He missed the Iowa State game and he missed the Texas game, and they did fine it against Iowa State without him. But boy, you wonder if they would have won that game if Jordan, because they were playing without their top receiver in that game, and they still took it to double overtime. But Tyson, you just mentioned it. I think he's the best intermediate route runner in the country. I think the in cuts especially. I could just imagine if they didn't already have a million guys, I can just imagine the Detroit Lions would love this guy, or maybe Ben Johnson and the Bears next year would absolutely love to have this guy running all those in cuts. Again, the way that he sets up defenders in his releases, in his route stems, and then at the top of the route, this is someone who I don't know that he's going to run a 4.3. I don't think so, but some guys surprise you, but he just knows how to get a step. On almost any route, if it's a 15-yard out, if it's a 10-yard in cut, he started to figure out last year on those deep posts and some more vertical routes. I think even sluggos could help him. I think this year, what's funny about his production, it could get way, way better because when you watch him and Sam Levitt try to complete the deep ball, it just wasn't quite there yet. It was starting to get there, and then he got hurt, but it wasn't there for the full season. If they start getting the deep ball going with Levitt and Tyson now with another year of chemistry under their belt, I know Jeremiah is going to be the favorite for the Biletnikoff, but Tyson could have an absolutely massive season if they can connect on more deep balls. But the two names that I keep thinking of with Jordan Tyson, one, I hate making same school comps because it just feels like a cop out. But one of them is Brandon Ayuk's a name I think of, and the other one is Chris Godwin. I think when you think about his role in an offense and Chris Godwin's role in the Bucs offense is just that move around, not really any one of Z or X or slot. You can put him at any part of the 53 yards of the width of the field and give him any route, and he's going to find a way open, or you scheme him open. I think Chris Godwin is actually my closest one right now for Jordan Tyson. That's the style of player I think he is.
I love it. And going back to the drops real quick, no one on this list had more targets, 113, and that's with him not playing against Iowa State and Texas. And he was tied for the most catches of anybody we talked about with Antonio Williams at 75. So also some of the volume there, I did want to just circle back to that. But no, I'm with you. And I think you're also spot on. I'm rounding the numbers here, but basically 44% slot usage, 56% out wide. Sign me up for that. And I kind of hope he gets the Matt LaFleur, Devontae Adams treatment where this snap you'll be playing some X. Now I'm going to move you in the slot. Now you're going to play some Z. Now I'm going to keep you on the line of scrimmage for a couple plays, and then I'm going to put you in, move them all around. Make this guy your kind of one size fits all in your wide receiver room and kind of base everything around that. Another comp I kind of thought of, he's like 22-pound heavier Jordan Addison in a lot of ways. I don't think he's quite as fast, but he's 22 pounds heavier than 173 Addison. I think that's what he weighed once he got to the combine. So I think that's another fun comp. But dude, Brandon Ayuk, I actually like that comp a ton. So real quick, let's go ahead and run through all of our rankings one more time. Awesome. So here are both of Dalton and I's rankings, 10 through 6. Here, let me ask you, Dalton, out of these guys, who maybe are you most excited to see this upcoming season, and who out of this group do you think can make the leap into your top 5? Put you on the spot here.
I think out of this group, if he's healthy, I need him fully healthy because he's such a big key and he has to be such a big part of DJ Lagway's improvement. I think it's Eugene Wilson. I think his skill set is something no other player on that Gators offense has, and he could give you the volume to really showcase everything he can do with the ball in his hands. And with a deep passer like Lagway, who's already got one of the best arms in the country, he's got just boatloads of arm talent. You could see the full 3-layered talents of Trey Wilson this year, as long as he's healthy. If he's recovered at 100%, I think he's the guy I see there as the most likely to break in because there's so much more that we haven't seen yet.
Man, I'm not going to rule out Eric Rivers because, like I said, I just need to see sometimes you take these guys from like non-Power 4 conferences and they just look like the best athlete on the field. Then you drop into P4, and it's like, okay, he just looks like a guy. If Rivers looks like he did at FIU, at Georgia Tech, good Lord, he might find a way to make it into my top 5.
Here's what I'll say with him. If he was going to move up, he went to the right spot and to replace the right guy. I think he's actually got, when you look at his skill set and what he did at FIU and what Georgia Tech is going to ask him to do, they're basically going to ask him to do all of the same things that Eric Singleton did. I need you to get vertical. I need an occasional jet sweep. We'll see if he moves up and he's an even better route runner with more diversity in it, fine. But they're basically going to ask him to play the same role. So I think he went to the right spot, and they still have Malik Rutherford in the slot flying all over the place too, and they still want to run the football first. There was times, I think, with Rivers, I know we haven't expanded on him much yet, but you want to see this from those G5 guys. There was times it looked like he was just faster than everybody else.
100%.
And if you bring that to the ACC with you in an offense like that, with a good quarterback who dealt with a shoulder injury last year and is now back to 100%, you're onto something. I get it. I think in that same exact role that Singleton played, he can really succeed this year.
Yeah, apologies. I guess I never circled back to Eric Rivers, but if we got into your top 10 there. But no, I'm with you. Long speed. I mean, there are reps where it's like, good Lord, did anybody else on this field know the ball was hiked? Like, he looks like he's just blowing by everyone, and they don't even know the play started. And he's an explosive route runner at all 3 levels. So I'm with you. I just need to see it at that, P4 level. And if you can get up to like 185, like, God, fingers crossed, if you can keep that speed at 185, sign me up for that. And then here are our top 5s. One more time. A lot of the same names. That's cool to see. I always like to see that. But you also brought some new names to the table, especially in those honorable mentions. So with all that said, Dalton, I want to give you the opportunity here to plug away. You do a ton of great work, and you're probably got to be one of the most overworked guys there at PFF, co-hosting the college show, the NFL show. But I'd love to hear, what are some of the things you guys are working on? Any special projects or anything you want to plug here?
So we've got all of our college football team previews up. We did every Power 4 team. We're getting Notre Dame in later this week. That's the last one we have to do. But all 68 Power 4 previews are up both on our YouTube channel on the PFF College Football Show. And then they're coming out in article form. They're rolling it out over the next. Some are already out. Some are coming out this week and next week. So get in on all of our team previews. We're going to have conference previews and predictions and award predictions, all of that. On the NFL side, we're about to start the same thing, an article series, a preview of all 32 teams that I'm going to be working on. And for the fans who want to get in on a PFF Plus subscription, whether you're in a fantasy draft, whether you want betting tools that are coming out soon, whether you just want to keep track of all the grades and just want, read all the premium articles and things like that, now through August 7th, we have an early bird special. If you subscribe for an annual subscription, which is normally $120, use the promo code EARLYBIRD, EARLYBIRD, EARLYBIRD. You'll get it for $79.99, 33% off through August 7th, $79.99 for an annual subscription. That's normally $120 a month. So check that out. Subscribe to PFF Plus. Check us out on YouTube, PFF NFL Show, and the PFF College Football Show.
Hold on. I got to do some quick math. 80 divided by 12. Guys, PFF Plus is well worth $6.67 a month. I am telling you. I also want to plug away, if you don't mind. Saw you guys are still hiring for part-time data collectors. I know that's where you got your start. That's how I started to get PFF Plus. That was when I did that partially to get this subscription service. But also, like, if anybody is looking for a start in football in general and you don't know where to begin, I think that's a great resource. Or if you just want to know more about PFF, like, a lot of people want to knock it, but then I always tell them, all right, well, you go do that. You go grade every play of every game for every single player. I'd like to see you take on that challenge. So even if you're just interested in how, the sausage is made, so to speak, I highly encourage that. And then you do actually get some access to PFF Plus if you make it through the class.
I'll tell you one thing, a really great read. One of our top analysts, Billy Moy, just put out an article, I believe, this morning about, it was about quarterbacks specifically, but how we grade and what our grading scale is. He did a fantastic breakdown of that. And for anybody who's not familiar or just who wants to get more familiar, because it's something I get asked all the time on pods like this or on radio shows and stuff, and they're like, how does it work? Because I did the grading for 3 years, right? So I was in data collection for 4 years. I did grading for 3 of them. And people ask me, maybe the most common question I get is, well, how does it work play to play? Billy Moy did a great job. There's an article on the website. Go read it if you want more information, just in general on how it works. Spectacular breakdown that he has there. He's one of our top 3 or 4 analysts, way better even than me. He's just spectacular. So check that out on the website too.
Yeah, I think it just gives everyone newfound respect. It's easy to just bash it if you don't understand it, but just take some time, get to know it. And even if you disagree on some stuff, you'll at least have the idea of how the process is done and how it should be conducted. And therefore you have an idea of how they came to that conclusion, right? It's like jumping to the end of the movie and being like, oh, well, that's stupid. Well, you didn't spend 2 hours devoting time into the character development, the plot development. You don't know why we're here. You have no context. So I think that's a great shout there as well. Dalton, man, I appreciate you carving out some time and talking receivers with me, man. Looking forward to getting you back on the show.
Absolutely, TJ. I appreciate you. It's going to be a great NFL season and a great college season. We're going to have fun with both of them. If anytime you want me on, just let me know.
Awesome. Sounds great. For Dalton, my name's TJ. We are signing off.